Yeah, welcome everybody to another New Way Growth ConeX LinkedIn Live session, and we are discussing fundings, grants, and probably some other things as well as we come out of that. So I'll now hand over to Sam, because Sam's going to facilitate this one, and me and Seb are going to be the protagonists, pro, negative, whatever it is, of this one. So yeah, go on then, Sam.
Good morning, everyone. Obviously, welcome along to this LinkedIn Live. As Adam said, yes, we're going to be talking about funding, finance, grants, investment, everything around to do with helping your business grow, essentially. So we've got the three of us here to talk around our experiences with the process and what we've been involved in the past. And yeah, any questions as we go through, please feel free to drop them in the message and in the chat area, and we will make sure we get them answered. The reason behind doing this, we do these different events once a month around a different theme, different topic, those themes that we think are important for manufacturers and our connections to learn a little bit more about. So this month is the turn of funding, finance, and all things money. So very quick introductions. So Seb, I'll hand over to you. So who you are, what you do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Seb Andras, I'm the CEO here at How Robotics. We make robotic software to make robots easier to program and to essentially allow operators to delegate their work to robots and other machinery.
Perfect. And Adam, don't know which where you want to introduce yourself from this morning, but
all New Way Growth is working with you on the ConeX Portal and what we do with these LinkedIn Live. So New Way Growth, we help SMEs, solopreneurs innovate and scale for financial success, but also our Factory IQ, which is an MES software, digital software side as well as other businesses as well. But I won't mention all of them. That's it.
Brilliant. So we're going to start with our kind of personal experiences in terms of funding, grants, what you've done in the past, not necessarily your current business or your current line of work, just general overview of what you've experienced in terms of the world of funding and grants and those sorts of things. So who wants to kick us off, or do you want me to start?
I'm easy. Let Seb start.
Go on then, Seb.
He's the guest.
So we're definitely still in the SME realm. We've been going for about 10 years, and this is my first business under my own kind of direct ship anyway. Previously, I was involved in a company that got a chunk of investment. It was an architectural practice. It was a slightly different world. And it was with a kind of architect. So I don't think that was really representative of what most people can expect. We've got a lot of support, and they kind of just to do some pretty crazy stuff. So I kind of probably came into this a little bit disillusioned, not disillusioned, but with a false sense of what funding was available, and how investors and things would treat us. We have, despite being kind of a tech startup, we've never raised VC or had kind of external investment. Like that is stuff we've looked at and thought about, but yeah, it's never come through. We've had a couple of loans. We've had a fair number of Innovate UK and EU grants. Those have been very beneficial to us. They've always been collaborative R&D, so they've got us in with interesting companies. We've rarely won any that we've put together ourselves, but with kind of partner organizations who've brought us on board, they've been fairly successful. I think we've probably had at least half a dozen Innovate UK things over the past 10 years, and one EU thing that's much more competitive on that side. And they've been really positive because I think we've learned over the years to make sure that what we're putting forwards as an Innovate UK grant is very much stuff we already wanted to do. I think that's a common slip up, is to think of them as free money and you can come do what you want and go down a rabbit hole, but they still cost you. So unless it's stuff you already had planned to do and you already have budgeted, you really have to think twice about it, what the benefits are going to be on going down that route. And then of course R&D tax credits and that sort of stuff. Are pretty great. Really helpful.
So you say the Innovate ones you were kind of brought in as partners in some instances. How did that come about in terms of how did the lead company find you, and how did that kind of consortium form?
So
almost?
I think we got a bit lucky getting pulled into the first couple, and then once we were in, we were in. So people, kind of research organizations like the BRE, pulled us into a few who do kind of construction legislation and regulation standardization stuff. And then we also, one of our kind of key demographics for our software is research and academia, or for one of our softwares is research and academia. So academic organizations are quite keen on going down that Innovate UK route because they get full funding, 100% funding rate. And therefore that's how they kind of fund their research, which is their whole job at the end of the day in academia. So because we're a tool and they kind of want to do experimental stuff with our software, they pulled us in to kind of basically finance development of our software that they wanted, without them having to pay for it. Which is, as long as it's stuff again that we wanted to do, is absolutely fine. If it was stuff that they just wanted us to do and we didn't have much interest in doing, then that's just a way for them to get stuff they want without having to pay for it. And it's a bit kind of backhanded and sneaky. And I'm not particularly keen on that.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So yeah, so it's kind of getting in the door first, and then more kind of follows from that. And I've heard similar around other Innovate bids as well. It's kind of once you're into the kind of network and once you're into the group, it's almost easier to access kind of next steps.
I think it's less about the network and more about the process. It looks really straightforward, but there are a few nuances to it that I think you really have to get to grips with. And unless you get in with someone who's been there before, those nuances can really trip you up. So I think we've had successful bids that we've put together having no one but us who'd been in a bid before, and they have been successful. So there's no real requirement, but we'd been through the process with someone else before, and so we kind of knew where to put the effort, what kind of things were expected. And I think that was probably the key, rather than there being some kind of malicious cabal and keeping everything inside a clique. I think it's more about understanding the process and knowing how things are going to get evaluated, and also picking your targets. There are some competitions for Innovate UK that are pretty hotly contested, let's say, and there are others that are much less contested. And so picking which one of those you go for also increases your odds.
Okay. So a quick question from me here now, because there's a few things that have piqued my interest on this now. So have all of yours been in the same area? So you are dealing with the same people, or have you had experiences of different or regional areas? So you're dealing with different people. And if so, what has been the experience? Is it the same standardized approach, or are there little nuances across regions?
So interestingly, ours has never been regional. It's always been kind of centralized pots of money. So it's these kind of bigger collaborative R&D funding calls. So the reality is, until we actually start the project, I don't necessarily know who from Innovate UK is going to be involved. We know quite a few of them. We were on the Made Smarter stand at Smart Factory Expo a few weeks ago, so we know a lot of people there, and they're lovely. But I don't know who's running the call, who's behind it, until we've been accepted or rejected. So yeah, my experience it's quite opaque at that point. At the application process, we've never really had much interaction with anyone.
Yeah, I found it quite different across regional areas, which I've always questioned. If it's a standardized approach and a standardized process, why the hell is it so different? And I've wondered whether that is some of the which brings me on to the other side, is some of the take up is lessened because of that different approach in different areas. And also the fact, like you're saying, there is, like you said, it's not like necessarily a click or a cabal. I'm like that on this one, on some of this, because I do think it's run like a little bit of a click, which I think Sam's alluded to with what his feedback has had, is the point of fact, if you're in that inner circle, you will get in quicker and move quicker. And again, some of that bureaucracy around that is I don't think helps with the take up on some of these programs either. But don't get me wrong. I mean, coming from my experience, we've done this with clients in different areas. And the one that springs to mind is the manufacturing growth program. And that's been, I have to say, where we've entered into that for clients, or clients have entered into it and we've been supporting them. No problem at all with the manufacturing growth program. But that's finished now. That's gone. Which is, I suppose, a similar way to sort of like mass and that sort of like side. But the experience I've had recently with them, yeah, I've not been impressed.
In some instances it's better, and I do understand the process. They don't necessarily want to pick up a startup from the absolute very beginning, no research done, don't know if it's a viable concept or anything, but they do want to get people early, and they do want to take people through that entire process from the very beginning all the way through. Rather than kind of picking stuff up when it's already established and it's already grown. So there is always that.
But again, that is like a catch-22 for me, is the point of fact, if you're a startup, the first thing you want to be doing is making a bloody sale. That's it. Nothing, everything else is secondary to it. Operationally, setting the business up, having the business name, whatever, business card, this, that, and the other, getting the office, everything means, go. You've got to make a sale, because that's proof in your concept. You have to make a bloody sale, and that's where it needs the support. So I'm quite passionate about that one on a startup basis.
We're going to come on to this in a minute anyway, around the barriers and around our current thoughts on the process and what could potentially change and what could be done. So before we get into that, Adam, what are your general experiences from current businesses, previous businesses where you've worked in the past, in terms of accessing funding and accessing finance? What have you been through before?
From a personal point of view, I've never entered into it with any of the businesses I've had, with exception. And Pete, with Factory IQ, we were looking at the casings for our 24-hour monitoring unit. So we worked on the Aerospace Up program, I think it was. And Peter, that was very, very run out. I think that was coming out of Nottingham University. That was good. They made a little, I've got it next to me here, designed a 3D printed case for us, and proof of concept of what we wanted and stuff like that, which was, from that side, was great. I've never done it with any of the other businesses, never needed to, never wanted to be fair. I can only go on the experiences that we've had with MGP and Mass and the likes, and that was always slick. I have questioned the running of those programs in allocation of monetary and funds and things like that, which I have been vocal on before within forums. But from that, I've never. The other side of this as well is, yes, they can be bureaucratic. Yes, they can be. But at the end of the day, if you're going for a 10 grand grant or funding, and you need that 10 grand or grant or funding, then spending 20 hours on it to get that funding is a worthwhile expense. So the bureaucracy side, yes, we need to make it slicker. Yes, we need to make it smarter. But if it is a priority, then we should be jumping through hoops for it, because it is going to make a difference in the long term to the business anyway. That's just my opinion.
That's fair enough.
I don't know whether I answered your question there. Again, recent experience from a support point of view of engaging with some of these. No, I've been absolutely, I won't name them, but I've been vocal before. I think are shocking. I think their reaction, their feedback, their follow-up, they are shocking. Even to an extent where I've actually been present at a conference where a conference has been speaking about the funding that's there, to then put their contact details up, and the contact details don't match the funding arm, and it's actually like a private consultant email address, and then I start questioning and saying, hang on, what's this about? Because I am very, very skeptical, because I've seen it firsthand, and I just think that's not congruent. There's no congruency there. So then the trust begins to wane for me. Yeah, that's just my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So from my point of view, I've applied for a couple of Innovate processes in the past, pre-ConeX, just with some of my previous clients when I was in freelance work. I'll be completely honest, I did not enjoy the process at all. I'm not great at condensing words, as anyone who has ever received an email from me will know. So trying to fit what we mean into, say, 400 or 500 words is very, very difficult. I've found the process very long, very difficult, and hard to get real feedback. A lot of our feedback was that you need to explain in more detail what it is that you're applying for. But then when you've only got 500 words to do that, it's quite hard to give any more detail. So I've had some difficulties and some interesting conversations with Innovate around that, and what they expect and how that works, and whether to get bid writers in and those sorts of things. And that is exactly why we have got a mastermind session for our ConeX members this Friday, with some of the Innovate UK team, and we're going to be asking some of these questions, and we're going to be having a bit of a discussion with them around what they're up to, what they're planning, what's coming next, how we can improve things, and having a bit of an open conversation with Innovate around that, which would be interesting. On the other side of it, I have found relative success in applying for some much smaller regional grants and regional funding. We applied for some funding with the DIT a couple of years ago, and that was honestly one of the easiest funding processes we went through. And it was brilliant. It was just nice and easy. They knew what we wanted. We knew how it worked. We knew what to expect. We knew how to finish everything off. And it was a very quick and easy process. And of course, ConeX was pre-funded in our early days by Aerospace Cornwall, in terms of the support and the growth that we had there. And yes, it was difficult, and yes, it was long processes back and forth to get everything exactly what they wanted, but ultimately it was worth it, to get up and running and get things moving. So there's varied experience, I would say, and varied understanding from my side. The challenge is that as a solopreneur, sole director of a limited company, I am incredibly time poor. And as the business grows, I become even more time poor. So how do I set aside time to apply for funding and grants, and even sourcing investment and whatever it may be that we want to do to grow the business? How do we do that in terms of how do we decide where to look, where to go, what's going to actually help the business and what's going to help us grow, and what's ultimately going to be a waste of time, because we don't have time to waste time. So on that, Seb, do you have any kind of strategies or ideas to ensure that you're getting that kind of return, focusing on that return on investment? Obviously, you're going to be a bit specific to your sector, which is fine. But what do you kind of recommend in terms of a time poor director?
Yeah, well, I think the other massive thing that you have to think about in that aspect is, what do you sacrifice to go for that funding? So, we're a tiny team as well. So if I'm spending, let's say, Adam's 20 hours doing something, what that I already had on my full plate, am I giving up to spend those 20 hours doing that application? So no, I completely appreciate that side of it. In terms of kind of getting returns, our space is robotics. It's high capex things in general. So I think it's really about making sure that you're evaluating all the benefits that you're getting out of whatever that funding or whatever that investment is. And for robotics, There are often very obvious things. So there's expenditure savings from not having to find the hiring costs or not having to pay an extra person's salary. We always think of robotics as replacing vacancies, not jobs. Just make that really clear from the outset. But yeah, there are obvious savings, but there are also things like how much less scrappage have you got? How much more productive can you be? How many more orders can you take on now that you've got this piece of equipment in place? And how many fewer health and safety issues you can have? So actually, there are all these kind of secondary benefits that are much harder to not necessarily harder to quantify, but harder to spot, essentially. So I think making sure that you engage with the right people at the right time, people who are in the know. No one knows your business like you do, but you might not know robots as well as someone like us or a system integrator who's helping you install robots. So I think being fairly open about how things, what the ROI you're expecting is, and over what kind of time period as well. We are in the UK pretty short term in that regard. Most UK manufacturers, although I'm sure anyone listening will correct me if I'm wrong, but the feedback we have is kind of 12 to 18 months for a new piece of robotic equipment. Over in mainland Europe, it's more like 24 to 48. In the States, it's the same. It's much longer term thinking, which obviously makes ROI way easier. You've got effectively twice as much budget to play for, or you pay it back, twice as fast. So I think that's also really important. And then also making sure that you're not spiraling. There's a lot of expectation, again, speaking specifically to robotics. People want all singing, all dancing, and that is partly the media's fault. It's partly vendors, salespeople's fault for overselling and say, yeah, we can do absolutely anything. And then actually there's a non-linear relationship between cost and complexity. And if you can say, I need this to be able to do 80% of this, and therefore you get a system that's half the price, you're going to get a much better ROI than saying, I need it to be able to do 100%. All right, okay, in which case you need vision systems, you need this and that and that and that. And actually you're going to pay for something that's 10 times more expensive just for that last 20%. So I think those are the big things for me, making sure you get your ROI.
Okay. Do I have a follow-up question? I kind of do, but I'm also wary of time. I'm going to come back to my follow-up question after I've asked Adam a slightly more controversial question. So you mentioned earlier around the process of funding and thinking why you should be getting funding. And you were saying, are you actually getting funding for the right reason, or do you just need to be making a sale and moving the business forward? Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yes. So from a startup point of view, yeah. So if you're starting up, your main focus, and I see this all too often, is that when people are starting up or thinking of starting up the business, they concentrate on the operational side of the business. Oh, I need premises, or I need this, and they haven't sold the bloody product yet. So they haven't seen the product market fit, and can they bloody sell? And that is where the priority needs to be. And this is where some of the support needs to happen, because if we do that and there is a good product market fit, then we get exponential growth then as well. So there's a whole lead in from that. So there's some business support on some of this, in particular startup though. So I'm saying that, not established.
So do you have any tips in terms of essentially not raising funding or not looking at investment or not, so essentially bootstrapping as a startup? Do you have any kind of, because selling products and bringing in revenue is essentially a way of raising money, right? It's essentially
absolutely, yeah. If the biggest tip for me is if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing a startup, you have to be your business's ultimate selling machine in the first instance. So the skill set needs to be understanding the sales and marketing side, and in particular making the sales, doing the marketing, and then the skill set of making the sale, actually converting as well. And 80% of the time you need to be focused on that, making the sale. You can get better later. There's a lot of people, there's a few influencers that say that, and I'm not big on influence because they're salespeople, not influencers, they're salespeople. End of. So the thing for me is around you've got to be able to sell. As an entrepreneur, you need to master your sales art, and once you've done that, you can then start building in the processes and everything, and then start building out from let's go and get a fancy logo. This, that, and the other means absolutely jack shit if you haven't sold a bloody product yet, and that's what you need to be doing, is selling the bloody product. Then you've proved it. Then you can carry on to different things like that. So the prioritization is different. And that brings me back as well, is me and you need to have a chat if you're saying your time strap, because there's prioritization on there as well. 80-20 rule, 64-4 rule, all manner of stuff on that. But we always have enough time. Always have enough time.
I've had a major realization over the last few weeks where my priorities are and should be, and I'm tweaking things.
I know you. We've had that conversation. The other thing I will add though on this is, and we had this conversation, I don't know whether you're coming onto it, around some of the time stuff and things like that, is obviously that we deal with the AI side and everything. So one of the biggest things is finding out what's out there, and and finding the funding that is there. So I've set up an AI workflow that just runs. So all I have to do, so I've built it out, and all I have to do is put in so like this morning, I put in Gloucestershire, puts in Gloucestershire, the workflow, then the AI goes out, scrapes the internet for me across that area, and then lists everything down. And I've done specifically on manufacturing. I've got it set up for service sector and all manner on manufacturing, and then outputs to me what is available to me, and gives me the description, the link, what is the eligibility, and also the funding side of it. So I've done that this morning in Gloucestershire. But I am looking. I've looked to see whether you can actually set that up in Zapier for other people, to have a go at. And I am just about there with that. But one of the things is the scraping, the search side. But that again is a time saver, on that side. But you can also then start looking at it from funding application and stuff as well.
It's a time saver until it gives you 20 different funding bodies that are applicable to your business, and then you decide you want to go and apply for them all.
Oh yeah, well yeah. Again though, that is where, and I haven't looked into this. This is where again you may be able to apply the AI workflow into that application process as well.
I agree.
Which that's the next stage for me to have a look at. But the workflow just runs, and I can set a timeline on it and go run every day, send it to email output to me, and it'll send me an email. And that's it.
Back to, I'm going to put Seb on the spot a little bit here and link those two things that we were discussing there. So Adam's saying very rightly so, that as a startup, we need to essentially be selling and getting product out there and getting over the line in terms of sales, which obviously generates revenue, which then proves viability, which then helps you apply for some of these things. So in terms of a return on investment, what is your sales pitch? What is your go-to? What do you tell your potential customers or prospects as to why they should be using your specific software and your systems and your automation systems?
Right. So our pitch really is about making operators more productive. It's about enabling automation to be used in places where it hasn't traditionally been able to be used, because we know that manufacturing is highly variable. It's not a completely standardized process. It never is. And parts change. And so if you're trying to invest in machinery that is locked to do one thing, it doesn't work. So we think that actually an operator and a machine can make a team that's better than the sum of its parts. And so by allowing operators to feed into the process without needing to learn how to program robots, regardless of how easy programming the robots is, it's still too complicated. So yeah, we're allowing operators to feed into the process, to use their intelligence, their experience, their tacit knowledge, to make the robot do its job better. And therefore they can delegate some of their work to the robot and handle the stuff that's actually challenging, actually interesting to do. They can keep doing themselves.
Not bad for putting you on the spot. So what do you think? Either of you can answer this. What do you think the major barriers are at the moment for companies in terms of accessing funding and knowing where to look and not having the time or whatever it may be? What do you think are the biggest struggles in terms of accessing some of this? There are opportunities out there. There are pots of money floating around. As Adam just said, he's done a search this morning in the Gloucester area and things have popped up straight away. So it's out there. But when you speak to some of these funders and when you speak to some of these areas where the money is, a lot of their feedback is we can't get rid of it. So what do you think the big barrier is? Why is there this difference between companies that want funding, but they don't know how to access it, and the companies that have the funding, but they don't know how to get rid of it?
I think you've missed the nail on the head there. Is bridging the gap between the two, isn't it? And that is the awareness of what's out there. So like I've done is I've created that workflow based on, and it didn't take me long yesterday to do it. Create that. In fact, I did it last night. There's timing for you. Do today what others won't, so tomorrow I can do what others can't. I did it last night and got it in there. And there's funding in there that I looked at and thought, Jesus, I'd never have put that in the spot, but it's there. So there used to be a common thing is, and I don't know whether both of you will have heard of this. There used to be, and it crops up a lot in forums that I'm in live. It used to be called Business Link. We've got gateways and the growth hubs and things like this. Well, Business Link, I think Andrea Wilson has spoke about this before. Business Link used to be sort of like the one place where you used to be able to go in a regional area to find out stuff around funding and things like that, which has gone. That's gone. So it's bridging that gap between we don't know what we don't know and finding out. So how do we actually do that? And one of those ways is utilizing things like AI or putting in a workflow to search for it and find out. But again, it brings you on to another subject is when you go to contact some of these people, they don't know what's out there as well. So you go to a relevant person, they'll know of certain ones, but not all of them. So again, that pot gets lost. So it does need a collective sort of like look around how can we actually standardize the approach across not just industry, across everywhere, so people can find these pots of money and be utilized. I mean, there was one in COVID, I remember rightly, there was 105 million put into it. Not one penny got spent.
Yeah, that's just insane, isn't it? What about yourself, Seb? Is there anything that you think is a major barrier as someone who has applied and successfully received funding?
I mean, I 100% agree with Adam. I think understanding what's out there and knowing what's out there is the biggest first hurdle. But then it's understanding what they want in that application and understanding what the requirements are. Some are much more technology focused. It's can you develop something that's really cool and pushing the boundaries of the state of the art. Others are can you demonstrate that this has a real return on investment. This is something, Innovate UK very proudly shout. I think it's something like for every pound they spend, they get £7 back into UK GDP or something like that. So some are looking for that kind of clear marketability, commercialization potential at the end. So I think it's really important to understand what the ask is, what the eligibility or what the kind of marking criteria are going to be. And I think that's the other big hurdle.
Brilliant. Just to answer Darren's question, has anyone had experience with the Innovate, Startup and Scale Up programs? Were either of those the ones that you
not explicitly in those terms? We have had experience with what is now called Innovate UK Business Connect, Business Growth. They used to be called Edge, I think.
Innovate Edge.
And so we've had a kind of business mentor from them for the past probably 6 months, maybe a bit longer, and they've been great. It's just really just as a sounding board to make sure that we're not chatting absolute crap most of the time and to keep ourselves in check. And it's someone you're accountable to, not hardly accountable to, but kind of someone you kind of feel like you're going to disappoint if you don't do something about your sales or your marketing or whatever over the next month between meetings. So that has been really useful. It is for us at least completely free, and they've been really helpful, and they are really good at finding those opportunities for funding. They've put us in touch with various funding organizations, various funding calls, various trips with Innovate UK to go. We've just applied for one to go to Germany to go and meet some manufacturers. So there's loads of stuff out there, and they are particularly well connected. It's their whole job. And actually, they are, although they're part of this program, they are officially a consultant. But that hasn't been a problem. It hasn't put us off, at least. So yeah, some people are affiliated to multiple organizations, and it hasn't been problematic.
Brilliant. I guess, Adam, you're the same. You haven't looked at either of those Innovate things. So what I will say there, Darren, is if you send me a message as to why you're interested, I'll put it to the Innovate team on Friday, which leads us nicely onto what we're up to next in terms of ConeX and our upcoming events. So as I've touched on there, we've got a mastermind session with Innovate on Friday to dive into some of the open competitions that are out there now, and to have a bit of a Q&A session with them around the current process and some feedback, and see what they're planning and what they're changing in the future. So that'll be a very interesting session. We've then got an event next week down in Plymouth where we're going to be talking around funding opportunities for the Southwest and Cornwall area. And that's at Plymouth University. So we're going to have a nice look around the new Babbage facility down there, which is a manufacturing facility, and go through some opportunities for that specific region. What I will say that Adam has touched on there is have a look at AI, have a look at some of these search terms and see what is in your local kind of region, local area. It's not all about Innovate. It's not all about the big national grants and funding. There is so much out there in local regions. So I would definitely say have a look into that. And if you want to know a little bit more around what we're doing at ConeX and how we're supporting our group of SME manufacturers, then you can connect with me or message anyone, and we will be able to help you out. And Adam wants to close with some final words.
It's only very, very quickly. So I was just going to say, if anybody wants to test out that AI workflow that I've done, just connect with me and send me the message of obviously, if I get inundated, then I'm not going to be able to do all of them. But the first few, I'll just test it and see what it comes up with, just to test it. And I will try and see if I can build something out within utilizing Zapier that I could just send out and anybody can copy and paste that to set it up. But it's proven a little bit harder, that one. But it won't defeat me. It won't defeat me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. How can people get in touch with you, Seb?
LinkedIn, probably the easiest way.
Perfect. I'll tag you in the comments of this, and then people can connect with you straight from there. Brilliant. Well, thank you all very much for listening and watching along, and thank you both for joining. And we'll see you at the next one.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.